Hello, I am so excited to be sharing this information with you guys today. This is going to be everything I know about reversing inflammation with lifestyle and energetics. My name is Kelly. I am a registered dietitian, a personal trainer. I take a holistic, functional approach to my clients and my own health. So I have always been a lifelong lover of sports, fitness. I did sports throughout college. That was really around the time I started diving into my own health struggles as I was at a point of burnout. Honestly, I was pushing my body too far. I didn't really know how to fuel and nourish my body and recover. And that is when I started to learn more about all of this, about energetics, about supplements, about food, all the things. I'm also a cat mom to my lovely cat, Miss Tika. So I as I said, I struggled with some symptoms of burnout. So for me, really, I was having cystic acne flares. It also did really start around the time I trialed the birth control and I came off of that. So we'll talk a little bit about hormonal birth control in this presentation, which for many of my clients is a piece in their inflammatory bucket. I also have struggled with pretty intense period cramps, irregular cycles, and anxiety. I also have done lab testing on myself and found a lot of nutritional deficiencies, high inflammatory blood markers, and I would consider myself to be potentially a more highly sensitive person. This is a term. I have actually a really great book on highly sensitive people that is not necessarily recognized through like clinical research, but just really categorizes people as being more sensitive to chemicals, to loud noises, to emotions, typically people that are more empaths. But this information can apply to anyone. I just find that many of my clients are also more sensitive to foods than other people might be. So why I am here is because I want to share about my approaches in coaching, about my experiences, and about how I have had these different awakenings, these different learnings throughout my journey, and how I've really started to focus in on the feminine energy and balancing out the masculine and the feminine energy and where those were showing up in my life. I love this quote that I found that says, "The world needs women who are dangerously awake, fully alive, and unified in heart and purpose." So that is really the goal of Unfiltered Nourishment, my business, of everything that I do in my coaching is to help women to feel their best. So I believe that our health is more than just numbers on a scale or numbers in our blood work. It's really about how we feel, about feeling pleasure and joy and peace and energy in our daily lives. I believe that a big piece of that healing comes from our emotions. I think like 70% of our health is going to come down to our emotions and our mental well-being and our mindset. Only about 30% is going to be that food and that exercise, which are still really, really essential. But I find that even when we have that knowledge, if we don't make the connection between our mind and our body and our heart, that we miss out on a big opportunity for healing. So I teach my clients about the inner child and about how we can change our subconscious thoughts, because these really make a big influence on our nervous system, our immune system, and our endocrine system. So why are you here? Likely you are here listening to this because you are struggling with weight loss, with period health, fertility, with skin issues, gut issues, maybe with anxiety and even energy and poor self-image, things like that. I see a lot of clients who they have all of these different systemic issues and they're not all diagnosed, but we know that they are likely connected to inflammation. So as I said, I practice from a more functional medicine perspective. However, I do think there is still going to be a diverse amount of perspectives out there on functional medicine. So really want to define what that means to me. So functional medicine to me is really asking more questions to my clients, really ruling things in rather than just ruling out a specific diagnosis. It is whole person care. So if you are watching on the YouTube or you're able to see the slides here, I have a picture of a tree that has all of these different symptoms, diagnosis, physical manifestations up on the top by the leaves, right? And the underlying roots can be so many different things. So these are the things that I want to check off for my clients that we are addressing. Some of this can be with testing. Yes, that can be helpful, but a lot of it is with our lifestyle, which is really primarily what we are going to be focusing on today. And so I consider lifestyle to be what I call the magic of healing. We need to address not just our lifestyle, our daily habits, routines, what we're doing, how we're spending our time, what we're thinking about, but also having community, having others who can support us on this. I believe that that is so healing, especially for women. Our brains and bodies really thrive off of oxytocin, this hormone of connection, of bonding, of love, of feeling calm. And then also understanding our subconscious mind, which is really a whole deeper level of changing our belief systems, changing what we believe is possible. And so we're going to get into that just a little bit today, but focus a lot more on the physical aspects of inflammation. So who I really help, I help people who have are more prone to perfectionism, to overworking, to chronic stress, whether that is over-exercising or under-exercising, or having emotional stress. I also help many people with gut inflammation, which is a lot of times due to undernourishment or numbing our emotions, this mind-body disconnect. So let's get into what is inflammation. Inflammation from a conventional medical standpoint is something we would detect with blood work. There are different markers, including hsCRP or high sensitivity C-reactive protein, IL-6, interleukin-6, ferritin. There's many others, but those are some of the more common ones. It also can be connected to just this systemic distress, to autoimmune conditions. We know autoimmune conditions are more pro-inflammatory. Depression and anxiety, we see inflammation, neuroinflammation and inflammation of the brain, cardiovascular issues, blood sugar and insulin resistance, and then even infertility, we see more risk of inflammation. So you can definitely have higher levels of inflammation without having severe symptoms like this, but it is also something that I like to look at preventatively as well as a way to monitor my clients' progress. Another data point that we can see to say, hey, if we are starting this new routine or this new protocol, is it lowering that blood marker? Is it helping? So it's not the only blood thing we want to look at, only functional marker we want to look at, but it is a big one that is oftentimes missed. Most conventional providers are not routinely testing that. They just don't include that in their panels. So what is gut inflammation specifically? Well, it is really inflammation that is taking its root in our gut, but it can still spread throughout our entire body. So that is where food and supplements can really, really help in managing systemic inflammation, is if it is starting in the gut. And so a few causes would be just disruptions in the good and bad bacteria. So that could be from taking antibiotics, from too much alcohol, sugar, from stress, from taking other medications, possibly even hormonal birth control, we know has risk of disrupting our gut microbiome. So it can also be from lacking certain hormones and nutrients that we need for gut repair mechanisms. And so a common confusion that I'll hear is that food sensitivities, we think that those are the root cause of gut inflammation, when really they are more of a byproduct. They are more likely to happen if we have gut inflammation. They are not necessarily the cause. However, I still will talk about food eliminations and trying elimination diets. My clients know this. That's one of the first things that I encourage them to try, is to decrease their exposure to potential inflammatory foods. However, that's not necessarily the root cause. It just might make things worse. So histamine intolerance, that's another topic that can get really connected to gut health and hormone health. Histamine is this natural immune molecule that is really involved in digestion, immune signaling, our brain, our mental health, and even our menstrual cycles. So I oftentimes think about histamine intolerance with my clients who may have more symptoms of low progesterone, really painful periods. And so it is something that's really connected to inflammatory type symptoms. However, it might be addressed a little bit differently. So we're not going to go super far in depth into histamine intolerance, but just knowing that it can connect not only to food intake, but also to hormones, to period health, and then also possibly even to different gene mutations, specifically the MTHFR gene, which is something I will test on my clients' foundations panel. So let's get into lifestyle, because that is really the point of this entire webinar, is teaching you everything that I know from a lifestyle, a habit perspective on how do we lower our inflammation load and decrease our risk of developing more inflammation. So I'm gonna stick with my electrolytes. Okay. So when we really focus on how we want to feel, making these anti-inflammatory choices can become easier. I'm going to say that one more time as we get into this, because it's a lot of information. It can feel very overwhelming at first. And I know that some of my clients have been on this cycle of trying things and feeling like their changes, their diets, they're not working for them. And then they just get frustrated and they go back to old habits. So I really want you to focus again on focusing on how you want to feel and knowing that it will be challenging to make changes, but that it will get easier over time. It is sometimes just that we are not giving our bodies enough time to really adjust. We might not be looking at the right data points to show that we are actually seeing improvements. So first thing to think about is when it comes to building new habits is dopamine. Dopamine is this neurotransmitter that really runs a lot of the show underneath. So when we are going to habits like food, like our phones, like quick validation from whatever that is, whether that is from our social life, from shopping, from whatever it might be, dopamine is a player in this. It is something that gives us pleasure, motivation, and drive. And so one of the first things that I share with my clients is how to break these dopamine-driven habit loops. So we first want to think about our habits as, instead of outcome-based, as identity-based. So thinking about long-term habits like exercise and food, these are going to give us more delayed gratification. So we have to know that they are not going to give us that quick form of validation, but what will is knowing that we have this identity shift from I have no willpower to I am someone who regularly exercises. It's not about willpower, it's about shifting that identity. And there can be so many different societal, generational fears around how we are going to be feeling. And so it's really picking away at those and knowing that we can change those beliefs. Another common one that I'll see impacting my clients is that changing how I live won't be fun anymore. I won't have fun, right? Fun is so relative. You can really change what you believe to be fun. And to me, feeling good in my body, feeling rested, feeling energized, that is more fun than some of the things that I used to think were really, really fun. So I am someone who loves getting my rest. I am someone who is worthy of healing, right? Those are all different beliefs we can start to have as we are taking away some of these quick forms of dopamine, like sugar, like alcohol. And with all of these things, there's also this option to not just go on this 30-day detox, which some people love to do, and that really works well, but to just try decreasing your exposure from these things. Try having that 80-20 mindset. I think that can be really valuable as a stepping stone. But what we do also eventually get to, and this is a place that can take some time to get to, is this place of detachment, of detaching from these worldly pleasures and these things that are not serving our health and that are more pro-inflammatory, and knowing that we can be happy and feel our best without them. So I love learning from meditation guides like Deepak Chopra, Gabby Bernstein, on how to really integrate the laws of the spiritual laws, detachment being one of them. And so I have a quote on here from Deepak Chopra that says, "When your happiness depends on anything outside your own self, you are a slave to external circumstances. Detachment allows you to be happy for no reason, to take joy in the sheer fact of existence, the way a child is happy. That is true freedom." I love that so, so much. So when it comes to nutrition, the approaches that I have found to be the most anti-inflammatory that we see people heal and reverse their inflammation with. The first one being the mind diet. The mind diet is going to combine some aspects of the Mediterranean diet with the DASH diet, which you can do a short Google search of what these entail. Really a lot of plant-based foods, a lot of fiber, still a variety of proteins and good healthy fats. the next one being the paleo ancestral diet. So this one, I think more of the Weston A. Price Foundation being a really amazing guide. And this is something, a resource that I have learned so much from. So I definitely encourage you to check them out and look more at some of their information. But the paleo or ancestral diet is going to exclude more sugar, dairy, gluten, grains, and even legumes. So that's going to be one difference, is it's a little bit more focused on meat and vegetables, and does have some fruits. I do have clients, and we're going to talk a little bit more about dairy in an upcoming slide, but that do really well with dairy. Others that have found that they feel better without it. And sometimes it is not that we're going to feel better immediately or even in a couple of months. Again, it might be monitoring blood work. This is really where I have been at. I have chosen to switch to just really good quality dairy and have it more in moderation, while I'm increasing the nutrient diversity of my diet. While I'm increasing vitamin A rich foods, increasing vegetables, increasing protein, increasing good omega-3 fats, right? So all of these things can make a big difference. You don't have to just immediately jump to following one of these things perfectly and cutting things out, but instead learning about the foundational principles. So the third one I have on there is a low-calorie weight loss diet, which is very vague. However, there is definitely some benefit to understanding calories and getting your body used to being in a calorie deficit, getting your body used to being in a fasted state. However, I also see with many of my clients who come to me who are high achievers, who are working a lot of hours, who are taking care of family, that they're already in a calorie deficit. They're in a calorie deficit and they're very inflamed. So pushing the calorie deficit harder is not usually the approach for them. I'm going to instead have them look more at the mind diet or an ancestral diet. So just keep that in mind. If you are someone who does struggle with overeating or binging, that is also not necessarily a time that we jump straight to a calorie deficit. Instead, I would want to focus on how do we feel more full with meals? How do we increase our regular, consistent meal timing? How do we eat more early in the day? So the weight loss, low calorie diets, and you can lose weight also on any diet, but there is definitely, I mean, going into nutrition research, there's plenty of research on low calorie diets. Okay. So this might be something to talk to me a little more about, but I would caution you to just jump to eating a low calorie diet and still eating inflammatory foods, because that is really against the point of this whole webinar. Is first we want to figure out what is inflammatory. Okay. So once you have established your cooking and your nutrition routines, then we want to take it a step further. And also you're moving your body. You're moving your body regularly. You're not sedentary. You're getting sleep. Those are some of those basic foundations. These are some of those more high level things that are going to really help to target inflammation and get your body into this healing state. So the first one is exercise intentionality. Having different forms of exercising or having a holistic exercise program is what I call it. So we really want to focus on building lean muscle mass, because this is going to help your body be in a more anti-inflammatory state. Muscle is this active tissue. It is helping to produce anti-inflammatory compounds. So it is so essential that we are doing strengthening exercises and we are not solely focusing on cardio. The next one being having some cardio. I do think cardio is great for mood and cardiovascular endurance, great for helping to calm cravings, helping to support the nervous system. However, there's also a point where we can be pushing our body too hard. So I recommend doing mostly low intensity cardio and then mixing in some small spurts of HIIT training. If you are to a point where you are well trained, you have so many of the foundations in place, that is then when I would add in more cardio. Like I know for me, I love to do running and biking as a social thing, so that's great, right? But I'm not omitting my strength training. And I would highly recommend that you also make sure you have that balance of both. The third exercise modality on here I have is more mindful movement. So these can definitely interconnect with the other forms of movement. You can practice mindfulness in anything you are doing in your daily life. You can practice intentionality. You can connect with your feminine energy. However, I think of yoga and Pilates as an amazing opportunity to connect with your feminine energy. Dancing, that's another one. hiking. These are times where you are really able to connect with your body, connect with your breath. You can do them slowly and mindfully and still gain a lot of really great different muscle adaptations. However, I caution you from using Pilates and yoga as your main form of resistance training and strength training. I don't think that this is going to be the most effective way to build muscle. But I know I have lots of girlfriends who they love the classes, and it's a great gateway into getting them into regular exercise. I love that. But just really keeping in mind, if you have these inflammatory conditions, this can be such a wonderful free modality, mostly free modality, to help support your inflammation levels, building muscle. The fourth aspect of a holistic exercise training program, and again, this can really connect with and be a part of your other types of exercise, is having some vagal toning support. So vagal toning is strengthening of the vagus nerve. This is the biggest nerve in our body, and it innervates a lot of our organs as well as our gut. So it is really, really important for helping with digestion, helping our body to get all of its nutrients from food, as well as support our nervous system as a whole. So vagal toning also can be really helpful for recovery. So I think of really meditation, breath work being two of the main forms of vagal toning. Also, cold therapy is another one. Mouth taping in the evening. I know that doesn't sound like fitness, but it does help us to strengthen our vagus nerve. And just thinking about nasal breathing and breathing through our nose when we are doing things like walking and yoga as well. So I also did add a really great informational podcast on that last slide from Huberman Lab and Dr. Stacy Sims about strength training. And this slide really just a good reminder that muscle and fat tissue are both active organs. They are communicating with each other. They are communicating with our whole body. Muscle is going to produce more anti-inflammatory compounds, more nitric oxide, which is great for energy levels. And fat is going to produce more pro-inflammatory compounds and also more estrogens. So if we are already in an estrogen dominant state, building muscle can be really, really helpful for that. Okay. So we talked about the types of nutrition plans to be looking into, to be planning your meals around, really keeping it simple. We want to have a good combination of plant foods and animal foods. I do not specialize personally in vegan eating styles. I think it is a lot more difficult to get all of your nutrients. However, some people can feel great and do great and monitor their blood work, monitor their nutrients being vegan. It's just more challenging in my opinion, and it was not something that served my body well. So getting a good mix of plant and animal foods is what I do and what I encourage my clients to do. The things that we are ideally limiting: poor quality grains. So when I say poor quality grains, I mean our more refined grains, our white breads, our white flours too. So things like pastas and pastries and things that have white flour. Also, our grains that are enriched, I encourage you to start avoiding. I encourage you to start looking at the labels and seeing
some white flowers, like elderflowers and jasmine, are edible and used in culinary.
I encourage you to start looking at labels for things that have grains. Even rice can be enriched, and avoiding things that say enriched. That is going to add in folic acid, and we can potentially have this issue with folate deficiency if we have an MTHFR mutation, which is actually very, very common and something we can test for. So opting for more organic grains, sprouted grains. The Weston A. Price Foundation has some really great information about sprouting and soaking our grains and how people have been doing that for generations to improve the digestibility, the nutrient absorption with our grains. Poor quality dairy, that is another one. I believe that organic dairy is the way to go. We're going to have less risk of antibiotics in the dairy, hormones in the dairy. We're also going to get those good healthy fats when we get a full fat dairy. So like I said, not everybody responds to dairy the same, and also not all dairy is created equally. If you are somebody who has lactose issues, that is one concern, and that's pretty easy to target. If you take out lactose, you likely will feel better. But if you have a dairy sensitivity, that is what's a little bit harder to really pinpoint. And I would recommend doing decreased exposure, as well as trialing a 3-month dairy elimination to see if your symptoms start to resolve. Caffeine, that's another one I think to just really take caution with if you are experiencing a lot of inflammatory symptoms. I think that caffeine in itself is not bad. People have all over the world, many cultures consume caffeine, but in this case of you are inflamed, you're maybe overworking yourself, might have a high stress load, I think it's just adding another thing. And another thing our adrenals are potentially responding to, increasing cortisol, increasing blood sugar. So with caffeine, again, tapering yourself down or switching for better quality. Less sugar with our caffeine, have it after our breakfast. Make sure we're getting in a good breakfast to stabilize our blood sugar, stabilize our energy levels first. I love the brand Purity for a mold-free, low-toxin coffee. You can get minimal caffeine in those ones. I think they have different levels of caffeine. I also love like a green tea option, matcha. So something you have to take out 100% of caffeine. But when I really started to connect that my intuitive guidance, my energy, my connection to that oxytocin, that calming hormone was so essential for my well-being and my health. To me, I started to really think deeper about things like caffeine, like sugar. How are those disconnecting me? How are they increasing my anxiety, my cravings? And so that to me has been a big driver of experimenting with changing my relationship with these things. Sugar, that's another one we know is not good for our gut. It's going to be more inflammatory, probably going to be more higher in calories and harder to keep us in a calorie deficit. But that's another one that you don't need to be 100%. I have really tapered my sugar intake down by finding better alternatives, using nut butters, dark chocolate, fruits, fruited jams as lower sugar options that still give me some of that sweet taste. And alcohol, we know also this is a carcinogen. It is a toxin. I probably don't need to tell you this. This can be one where the dopamine-driven habit loops is so essential to start learning and reflecting on, because it is not usually a knowledge gap when it comes to alcohol. It's not usually a planning gap. It's a cravings issue. It's an emotions issue. It's a social circle thing where we're doing it socially. And so we can start to really reflect on, again, what is going to feel good for our bodies? How do we want to choose the 80-20 approach? Do we want to trial a 2 to 3 month detox? There are so many ways that we can start to decrease our alcohol intake and still have social outings, have pleasure in our life, right? And learn other ways to regulate our emotions. Okay. So as I said, the dairy dilemma, that's one that I don't like to demonize dairy because it also has a lot of good nutrient quality in it. But there are different forms, A2 dairy, organic dairy, fermented dairy, that can be the most likely to be less inflammatory. Trying a 12-week elimination, trying to slowly add them back in, see which ones you feel best with, might be a way you can pinpoint this. However, I know personally for me, I need to give myself like a full cycle to really see how does my period respond. Because to me, my period is a big driver of me knowing like how did my body respond to these things. For others, it's skin reactions, right? It's so many other things. So chat with me about how to do food eliminations if you are still confused. Okay, so beyond food and fitness, some of the other, really this is the main other tools that I use. The first one being subconscious reprogramming. This is a big topic, but if you are finding that stress and anxiety are a big piece of your life, I really encourage you to start learning how to reprogram your subconscious mind. This is something we talk about in my membership, in my one-on-one coaching. I give you scripts, I walk you through live reprogrammings so you can learn how to do these techniques on yourself. I'd encourage you to start reading into inner child work, chakra work, feminine and masculine energetics. These are all interconnected and can help us to start to feel more pleasure in our daily lives, to get out of this grind hustle culture into more of a state of ease, of softness, of feeling good, and detaching from all of the data and the numbers. The data and the numbers have a piece. I want you to be tracking your muscle mass your PRs when you're lifting, your fat mass. I want you to track these things, your blood work, but they are just a piece of the puzzle. So yeah, there's so much under the surface that we can do to regulate our stress response and help to calm inflammation. The next one being supplements. These are an essential piece for me. I do think that even with a really clean diet, supplements are still going to be valuable. They are something that we have discovered, we have learned how to create from our natural foods, from our natural ingredients. And now that our food is more depleted of nutrients, our bodies are more stressed, I do think supplements are a non-negotiable thing. It's just determining which ones do you actually need and for how long and for what dose that gets tricky. So I would start with, I have my Women's Health Foundations protocol in Fullscript that has a great multivitamin, omega-3s, start there. Omega-3s are going to be very anti-inflammatory, help to combat if you do have some inflammation, but also give your cells really amazing raw building blocks to repair themselves. Same with the multivitamin. Testing is something that you can pursue in my membership or in my courses, which I will talk about here in a minute. There's lots of tests out there, and I don't always think we need to jump straight to them. For me, taking a good multivitamin is going to help to prevent deficiencies. So we want to start there. The next one is sleep quality. I need to take a sip of my water. I don't have electrolytes on here, but that's another really great one to add in. Most individuals are lacking in magnesium and potassium, making sure you're adding in good quality sea salt, either from your electrolytes, adding it to your food, all of the above is a great way to also help decrease your caffeine intake. Okay, sleep quality focus. This was so life-changing for me, you guys. Seriously, so life-changing. Once I really started to prioritize my sleep. I was really good at sleep in high school. College was a whole different story. Then I was working early shifts as a personal trainer. So I have not been perfect with this. I love to go out. I mean, I've been a very social individual. Really now in the last year, have been focusing more on sleep consistency and not having that inconsistency between my weekends and my weekdays. That has also really helped with my energy levels. So for me, I did not use a tracking device until about like 7 months ago, and now I love it. I really do love it. It helps me to understand my recovery metrics from harder workouts, my heart rate variability throughout the different stages in my menstrual cycle. So whether you are going to just use a good old-fashioned habit tracker to start tracking your sleep hours, to be more consistent, to set boundaries around how late you're going to stay out, how late you're going to eat dinner, those different things, or you use the recovery trackers, it is so helpful. Sleep is truly one of those foundational things that our body needs. Our bodies have evolved to still need a lot of sleep. And as women, we do need more than men. Men can also benefit from getting a good 8 hours of sleep, but women, we really need that 8 to 10 full hours of sleep, especially in the luteal phase. So doing your best with that. The next thing being circadian fasting and cycle-based fasting. So first of all, again, we did not go super far into bioidentical hormones and birth control here. That is step one. If you can get off of your hormonal birth control and you can start to use the fertility awareness method, cycle syncing, that is going to take a huge load off of your inflammatory bucket. We have so much research showing birth control is more pro-inflammatory, more risk of autoimmune conditions, of gut imbalances. It's still hard to really say this causes that. We can't necessarily say that, but again, it's something else in your inflammatory bucket with other environmental things, emotional things, and food things. So if you can come off of that, which I know is a big decision, and I know for some of my clients who have PMDD or endometriosis, they are just not comfortable being off of it because of their symptoms. And I think that is understandable. And we want to make sure we're really doing everything we can to address the root causes of those things. And that is a great time to pursue functional labs. But if you are solely using it for fertility, I would really encourage you to schedule a call with me, chat through some of your questions, your concerns, chat through the process, how to use the Natural Cycles app. I would love to share. I have guides on how to do that. And it is not something to fear. It is something that can be so empowering, getting connected with our natural cycles. coming off of birth control will help our body to produce natural progesterone, which on most birth controls we are not producing because we are blocking the process of ovulation. No ovulation means no natural progesterone. So, anyways, once we have done that, circadian fasting is truly just eating meals with our circadian rhythm. Eating more early in the day, not eating too late at night, eating pretty consistent times throughout the day can really help with digestion, with blood sugar, with energy levels. Cycle-based fasting, this is a little bit more diving into some intermittent fasting and having some longer fasting windows, which is not something I recommend starting with. I just want you guys to know that this is something to eventually consider pursuing, but we need to be really in tune with our recovery, with food quality. We don't just want to start with that. We want to make sure we have good quality food focus first. I love the book Fast Like a Girl. It's something that my membership is reading this month as our book club book. So we're starting to learn more about that. It also just really explains some of these high level physiology topics really well and helps you to know that fasting every single day as a female is not it. That is not the way to go. We don't just need to jump into that. I actually do not even practice fasting myself, and I've seen so much other healing without doing that. I just simply eat within a about 12-hour window. So it is not something to stress about initially, especially if your life is busy, chaotic, you have kids, you have activities, you have long work hours. It can be something that can make meals actually more simple, but also can be risky with under eating. So chat with me about fasting if you have questions. Stomach acid and bile support is another thing to look into, especially if you experience bloating. I get almost all of my clients on digestive bitters and encourage them to eat more bitter vegetables to support bile health, as well as making sure we are understanding what are some signs of low versus high stomach acid. I also love the baking soda stomach acid test to assess for potential low stomach acid. Talked a little bit about birth control, but bioidentical hormone therapy is not something we've touched on. That is another thing that as we get into our upper 20s, 30s, 40s can be something to possibly pursue. We're not going to go super in depth into that. Usually that requires some testing and some monitoring, but just knowing that if your body is not producing enough hormones or they are out of balance or just not in the right ratio, we can support those without birth control. We can use what are called bioidentical hormones and are the same form as our body produces. So unfortunately, these are not commonly prescribed because you're not able to get a patent with them. So pharmaceutical companies could not make as much money, so we created these synthetic forms. Okay. We talked about dopamine detoxing, taking breaks from those things that give you quick dopamine, that give you that quick fake pleasure, and instead focusing on those long-term goals, on doing the hard things, the meditation, the long cardio sessions in nature, cooking the meals, those things that feel so mundane but are truly helping to reset dopamine. Interestingly, fasting is something else that can be used to reset dopamine, which I think is so interesting and something I'm starting to want to dabble in. But again, I don't think you need to start with fasting. Switching out endocrine disrupting chemicals, products, foods. We already talked about the foods, but really thinking about, okay, what are some of those clean beauty swaps I can make? Cleaning products. This is, again, something that takes time and is a step-by-step process, but even just one swap at a time makes a difference. So I'm not going to dive so far into this topic. It's a big topic, but first, making sure we are using glass and less plastic, especially when we're reheating things at home. Checking out places like Thrive Market, the Yuka app, the EWG app to check out some of our products and figuring out which ones can we make some swaps with. Another way to decrease your exposure to pesticides, toxins is getting a water filter, a really good quality one. So my AquaTrue filter, around $300, so it is an investment, but it's something that I'm using it all day, every day. I'm drinking water all the time. I work from home. It is something that I was like, I can't believe I didn't make this investment sooner. Especially where I live in Iowa, there's just a lot of pesticide runoff into our water supply, unfortunately, because it's a big agricultural state. So I think that that makes it so important to filter our water. And the last thing on my list is histamine and gut microbiome support. So beyond just focusing on good quality of food, we also can look at what is our fiber intake. Higher fiber intake can really help rebuild the gut microbiome, looking at prebiotic, probiotic intake, and also looking into possibly a GI map test is something I offer in my membership. Okay. So if you are like, this is resonating, this is amazing, this is so much information, but I feel so empowered and excited to apply this to my life, to start to try some nutrition changes, try whole foods diet, try decreasing my dopamine exposure. I have 3 next steps for you. So the first one is to reflect. What in my life could be really contributing the most to my inflammation? Take a really honest reflection and think through sleep quality too, right? I already talked about that. But what are those big things that I could be making changes? And what are the symptoms that I could use as my guide to help me stay motivated? Possibly what can I do to get blood work? Can I work with Kelli? Can I go online and find some, right? Which I just don't recommend going online, but finding a place where you can get some inflammatory markers tested. Next step is dream. How would my life change if I took action? And how would it if I didn't? What could it look like if I didn't, right? How will I feel in a year if I take action versus if I don't? Step 3, take that aligned action, baby. Create a habit tracker, create some daily, weekly, and monthly non-negotiable goals, and commit to doing them. Reflect every week, come back. How did it go? How am I feeling? Even if the progress is really slow, I think that that weekly and monthly reflection is so important. Taking progress photos of your body, of your skin, using the period tracker so you can look back at that data over the years and be able to see what is going well, what in my life has changed, what emotionally has changed, what stress-wise has changed, what medications have changed, and how am I feeling? And if you are like, yes, 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 this resonates with me, I want to share about some of my coaching services, how you can deepen your healing, find some additional support. If you are ready to feel your best, make this the year that you really, truly transform your mind and your body, then I would love to support you in that. So first I have my embodied detox. This is a program that is a part of my membership. So with the embodied detox, you order some functional labs, you get some one-on-one time with me to interpret these, and you go through some really high-level monthly calls, diving into what these labs actually mean, teaching you how to interpret these labs, as well as going through more of this anti-inflammatory lifestyle stuff. So this one, it is required that you actually get the functional labs with it. You get access to, like I said, my membership services. So you get access to all of our monthly events. We do at least 3 to 4 monthly group events. You get access to my app. You get access to my member-only emails. And yeah, so much support with that. Then I have 2 mini courses I am so pumped about. These are really going to be compiling a lot of what we talked through, but even more actionable steps that you can use to really keep yourself accountable to committing to the changes. So inflammation ease is focused a lot on the anti-inflammatory eating styles, increasing your plant-based food intake, your plant-based diversity, while still committing to strength training, committing to building muscle. Reclaim your spark. This course is for my girls who are struggling with the dopamine-driven habits, with feeling addicted to sugar, with constantly looking forward to the weekend so they can have alcohol. And again, there is no judgment. I have been there. I am still struggling with these things. That is why I make these, because the things that have helped me, I want to be sharing. So reclaim your spark. Really, yes, more a focus on that lifestyle, changing our emotions, changing our subconscious mind. Then I have my unfiltered nourishment app, which if you've been following me, hopefully you've seen some of my posts about the app. It is a wonderful option to get started, to hang out, message the community, the Strong Her community, grab a strength training program that you can do, learn more from my recipes, and just have some of that additional insight. I think that when we are on a healing journey and we are wanting to make changes, right, the more exposure we can have to others on that journey, to keeping that forefront of our mind is so, so helpful so that we don't push it aside. We don't put our healing on the back burner anymore. We keep it in the forefront as a part of our life, and it will trickle into so much more than we can imagine. So lastly, I have my one-on-one coaching options. So Nourish, you can go through the Nourish platform and work with me through a variety of different insurance companies. Flourish is my one-on-one coaching membership where you can order additional labs. I highly recommend going through my courses first so that you have all of that knowledge, because otherwise it's kind of just reiterating some of that. So anyways, please check them out. I have my website, my social, my email on here so you can connect with me, and I would love to answer any questions that you have about healing, about inflammation, about all the things. I love you so much. Thank you so much for listening today, and I hope you find some value.